have you ever, like, really thought about what makes life possible?
Besides Puffy.
Okay, yeah, good point. But I mean, beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
beyond the stuff we see and feel every day, there's this whole microscopic world, right, happening inside us all the time.
It's true. And at the center of it all, there's this process. It's happening billions of times right now as we're talking.
Mitosis.
Mitosis, yeah.
Okay, so today we're diving deep into that, all about cell division. We're working with excerpts from a lecture here, and trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds at first.
Oh, absolutely. Think of your body like a city, a busy one. Cells are always growing, dividing, replacing each other.
And mitosis is how that happens.
It's the whole engine, makes it all possible.
Okay, so it's like each new cell needs the instructions to function.
And it's got to be a perfect copy every time. Those instructions are on the chromosomes.
Right, chromosomes.
Yeah.
Those tiny packages of DNA, they decide everything about us.
Eye color, height, you name it.
So before we go any further, we got to recap. Chromosomes, they're the blueprints, and mitosis makes sure each new cell gets a copy.
Like making sure every new building in that city gets the original architect's plans.
Perfect analogy.
Mhm.
But how does one cell actually become two? How does that work?
Well, it's not just one thing, mitosis. More like a journey. It has phases. Each one's got a job to do.
But chapters in a book.
Exactly. And we got to break down each one to really get it. So Act 1 in this whole cellular drama, it's called prophase.
Prophase, okay, so like the setup.
Exactly. Chromosomes, usually, they're kind of a mess. They condense, get compact like a tight spring.
Makes them easier to move around.
You got it. And then the nuclear envelope, the membrane around the nucleus, it breaks down, clears the stage, basically.
So you don't just copy the blueprints. Got to get them ready to move.
Exactly right. And that's where the mitotic spindle comes in.
Mitotic spindle.
Imagine like ropes or tracks to guide those chromosomes to where they got to go.
So like setting up the scaffolding, getting those blueprints moved.
Very organized construction crew, you could say. This takes us to prometaphase. That's where the chromosomes attach to the spindle fibers, like hooking each one up to a tiny tow cable, you know. Okay, so now the real action starts. The cell goes into metaphase. That's where the chromosomes, all copied and lined up perfectly in the middle of the cell, attached to the spindle fibers.
So it's like a parade, everyone in their spot.
Exactly. And here's where those checkpoints come in, the ones we talked about before. Cell takes a second to make sure each chromosome is hooked up to those spindle fibers, right? Ready for the split.
And if they aren't, what happens?
Well, that's how mistakes happen. Imagine a blueprint gets ripped in half right here. New cells, they might not have all the instructions right. Could be anything, some small mutation, or bigger problems like Down syndrome.
So even a tiny error there, it has a huge impact later on.
Huge. But let's say our cell here, it's doing great, passed inspection. Now it's time for anaphase, and this is the really cool part.
Okay, so the energy's building, what's happening?
Those spindle fibers, they were just kind of holding things before, they retract fast. Pull those chromosomes apart, one copy of each blueprint to each side of the cell.
The whole cell's being pulled in two directions.
Yeah. Perfectly timed tug of war. That's how each new cell gets a full set of instructions.
And once those chromosomes are in place, then what?
Then we hit telophase, the last act. Cell calms down, new nuclear envelopes form around the chromosome.
Like closing the curtains on two news stages.
Exactly. And finally, the grand finale, we call it cytokinesis. Cell membrane tinches in, divides the cytoplasm, and there you have it, two identical daughter cells.
2 for 1. And each of those can start the process over. But like you said, sometimes things go wrong. Mitosis goes off track. What happens then?
That's when it gets dangerous. Uncontrolled cell division, that's a cancer hallmark. Cells ignore the signals to stop, they just grow like crazy.
So it's like city planning goes out the window. Building permits everywhere. No rules.
Perfect way to put it. Those rogue cells, their DNA's messed up. They multiply way too fast, get even more aggressive, harder to stop.
That's where chemo comes in, right?
Exactly. A lot of chemo drugs, they're designed to mess with mitosis. They target those fast-dividing cancer cells.
Like sending in a demolition crew to stop the construction.
That's the idea. For example, some chemo drugs, they stop those microtubules from forming. Those are what the spindle fibers are made of.
No tow cables, no moving those chromosomes, no cell division.
Exactly. It's amazing what scientists have come up with.
It is. But I'm guessing there are challenges, right? It can't be easy.
Oh, for sure. Cancer cells are tricky. They adapt really quickly, become resistant to the chemo, like how bacteria get resistant to antibiotics.
So it's a constant race, staying ahead of the game.
You got it. It's not simple at all.
Yeah.
But knowing how mitosis works, that's been huge for developing these treatments.
It's amazing how much we've learned about this stuff, how it translates to real solutions. But there's another kind of cell division.
Right, meiosis. Mitosis, that's for growing and healing. Meiosis, that's about variation. Mixing up the genes, making sure offspring are unique.
So mitosis is like making copies of the plans to keep the building running, and meiosis is mixing blueprints from different buildings to make something totally new.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And that mixing, that's what makes sexual reproduction so important. Creates all the diversity we see, you and me, all the different species, everything.
It's incredible. These two processes, mitosis, meiosis, always going on, shaping life. One keeps us alive, the other makes sure the whole species keeps going.
And it shows. We focus on ourselves, but really we're part of this huge web, sharing genetic information, changing over time.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We started in a single cell, ended up talking about evolution.
We saw how cells divide, how important those checkpoints are, and what happens if something goes wrong.
We talked about how errors in mitosis, they can cause problems, even lead to cancer.
And how scientists are using what we know about mitosis to fight it, with chemo, trying to stop those out-of-control cells.
It's amazing how we figured this out, how it can actually help people.
It really is. And it shows why we got to keep researching, keep learning about this stuff. The more we know about these basic processes, the better we can deal with health problems in the future.
Absolutely. So to wrap up, I got to say, I'm kind of blown away by how complex and beautiful this all is. It's happening constantly inside all of us, all this cell division making life possible.
Yeah, and it reminds us never underestimate a single cell. Healing a cut or understanding cancer, mitosis is a powerful thing.
It really is. Okay, until next time, keep exploring, keep the questions coming, and we'll keep diving deep into this amazing world with you.